Okay, so I'm going to ask you to pause your team discussion. So today's the Rare Project Studio class. We're going to record part of the class. So I've kind of walked around and seen everybody's got some pretty good lists. So what I'm going to do is maybe ask each team to share a few items on the list, and I'll plot them out actually visually here, and then I'll save this to Blackboard. We'll actually have a visual kind of picture, and then you can take this away. I know from the stand-up meetings and talking to you, a lot of people have said, we're working on our budget. So there may be some things that come out of this discussion that will be things you'll have to think about that are going to influence your project budget. So I'm going to maybe start with you guys. You maybe want to tell us 2 things on your list, and I'll add them to our. Okay. So labor costs. Yep. Okay. Okay. Oops. We may need to buy certain software and licensing. Yep. Okay. Give us a couple from your list. Okay. Can you explain what that is, Matt? Yeah. Okay. Right. There's a famous saying it's not necessarily in web projects, but in any kind of sales, under promise and over deliver. Right. So rather than promise your customers promise them everything and then set expectations really, really high that make it really difficult to meet, we're better off, for example, we think we need 2 weeks, we may be better off to tell the customer we need 3. And that way we're building in some time for contingencies to handle unexpected events or problems. Okay, so that's probably a good idea, some sort of buffer, right? We think the project's going to cost $5,000. Well, we may want to quote a little more than that because there's a good chance there's going to be some unexpected things that are going to increase those costs. Okay, so that was one. Something else I should add? Okay, so maybe, and so software would be another example of that. So maybe I'll just split this. Whoops. So we'll make this third-party costs, and then we can, so we have software. Something like media. Okay. Can you tell me 2 things on your list we should add here? Okay. Yep. Okay. Okay. Right. If we have a lot of content, who's entering it on the website? If we have to do it, well, there's going to be time involved in doing that. Okay, what 2 things on your list we could add? Right. Okay, so that's one of the most important ones is simply time, right? Project that takes a year is going to be a lot more expensive than a project that takes a month. Okay, something else on your list? Right. Well, I'm just going to modify that a little to say marketing in general, right? We'll talk about that later in the course. A lot of the marketing is digital, but we may have additional marketing costs beyond just digital, depending on what we're doing. Yep. So that's absolutely going to affect our project cost. This team in the front here, a couple other things from your list that we could add. Anything that hasn't been mentioned? Division of work. Okay, so that would probably be related to labor. Aha, okay, good one. What happens after this website or this application is put into production? And what happens if we need to make changes or do debugging? Right? There's costs involved. Anything else on your list? Yep. Okay. Yep. Aha. We've got servers and then a whole bunch of related children. So we've got domain names. What other costs related to this would we need? So servers, I guess this should be server/hosting. We'll have to figure out that cost. Where is it going to be hosted, right? That's going to play into it. What else will we need besides a server and a domain name related to this? Okay. Yeah, so that's something separate, but that's true. We do need. Jaden, you had your hand up. Right. We need SSL, right? That by now is automatic. We need it on every site. So those are going to be costs. We need hosting. We need a domain name. We need an SSL security certificate on any web application. Okay, Rakeel, anything else on your team's list that you guys had? John, I think the list was on your computer. Okay, so yeah, maintenance warranty. So that would go probably in here. Yeah, anything else already on here? Testing, yeah, I guess we can add that here. Okay. Okay, so that's good. I think we've heard from, yeah, I'm going to save this to Blackboard. You don't need to take a photo of it. Okay. All right, so I've asked everybody for two, but do you have anything else now? I'll just sort of open it up. Other important considerations that we don't have so far that we should add from anyone. Okay. It could be things like, oops. Right. So do we have to, are we having lunch meetings with our customer, right? Where we have 5 people from our team at the meeting that we have to feed, right? That's got to go as part of the project budget. Rando? Absolutely. We start our project in December and we say it's a month. Well, are we working over Christmas holidays? How does that factor in? That's something we want to think about. Yeah, that's probably, I would say, next to time, functionality is probably the next most important. Right? So what is it that we're building and how simple or complicated are these things, right? That's going to greatly affect the cost of the project. Well, okay, we could add that maybe marketing. Are we doing this? Doing it themselves? Are we outsourcing it to a third party that specializes in SEO? We want to think about that. Okay, this is a tricky one. Training comes kind of in two forms. So one training is us training our client on how to use the application we built for them. So there's that training. We've got a budget time for that, right? So for example, for your food sharing application, there's going to be users. It's not just a content website, right? There's people going to be using it. So we should anticipate in your budget, there should be some time for teaching them how to use it. But there's also training. This is the tricky one. What happens when we're building an application and that requires us to use technology that we don't know? Programming language or a tool or a plugin or something that we're not familiar with. Who should pay for that cost? Does the client have to pay for us to learn something new? Or is that just part of our job and we can't charge them extra for the time we would need to learn that new technical skill? What do you think about that? There's kind of no clear answer about that one. Yep. Okay. Somebody here, Karan, you were going to say? Okay. Okay. Any other opinions about it? Margot, what do you think? Yeah, if you've got another one, I'll come back to you in a minute. Just thinking about who pays for us to learn if we need to learn something new technically in order to do a project. Is that our cost or is that something we can charge our customer for?
Well, the thing is, if we're going to out, if we're not familiar with it and we're going to outsource it, we can probably have limits that cost.
Okay. Yep. So I think labor cost comes in. If we're talking about outsourcing, that would fit in to the labor costs, whether it's our own cost or whether we're going to hire somebody else to do the work. Anybody else have an opinion about that learning time and who should pay for it? Okay. 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 What I've generally found has worked for me is some kind of a mix. If I have to learn something new because the client has certain technologies that I've never used, but they want me to do the job, I will charge them a small amount of time for me to learn, but I won't charge them all of my time. So in effect, I'll pay for some of it and I'll charge them for some as kind of a balance. That seems to work fairly well, but there's no right and no wrong answer about that. It's hard to know how long it's going to take you to learn enough to then go and be productive, right? So because that's hard to judge, I'll typically say, I'm not familiar with this technology. So what I will do is rather than say, I'm charging you time for me to learn, I'd say if I was using, ASP.NET, this would take me 100 hours. But if you want me to do this in Ruby on Rails, well, I'm going to need more than 100 hours. I just won't be as productive because I'm not as experienced. I don't know the technology. So I would just charge more in terms of the time here. Ken?
after the 1 month, and you lost the program, and you have something.
Yep. Okay, so in here, so some sort of time limit. Okay, yep. Makes sense. Okay, Margot, there was another point you wanted to add to this? Okay.
Taxes either on labor or taxes. I don't know if you can charge it.
Absolutely. If you have an HST number, and we can talk about that maybe a little more another day. But yes, you do charge HST. If you have an HST number, you do charge that. And there's some benefits to doing that, right? So that means instead of $1,000, you charge $1,130, and you charge your customer, and you have to submit quarterly that $130. You give that to the government, right? Because that's not your tax money; it's the public's money. So you have to give that to the government. Sorry? Right, but it also means that all the tax you pay on buying a computer, on your hosting services, you get all of that money back. If you're charging HST, it means you don't pay HST on all your business expenses. We'll talk about sort of incorporation and taxes and things. We'll talk about that another day. Well, so absolutely, once all of the costs are done, we want to make sure we've budgeted as such that there's some money left. If all we've done is pay the expenses, well, we didn't really actually make any money and we're no further ahead on the project. So if our expenses on this are going to come to $8,000, we want to charge more than $8,000 for the project so that we've actually made some money on the project.
We let them know that how much we made.
Absolutely not. Never. Do you know how much, when you go for dinner, if you go out for dinner, do you have any idea how much the restaurant makes? Right? So that is not our client's business, right? That's our own. Okay, that's a pretty good list. I can save this to Blackboard unless there's anything else that we should add to it. Sure.
I'm noticing a lot of this is leading over to project proposal. That is like the scope and risk management. So do we mention, like, I just thought, like, when you first showed us Daniel's assignment, for example, and he just had like a list of like division of labor and how much we're charging.
Yep.
I don't recall.
Doesn't mean these things need to be itemized in the budget. These are things, though, as you guys are working through the budget, both individually and as a team, these are the kinds of considerations you should be thinking about. Doesn't mean the client has to see every one of these items. But these are the things that are going to affect how much the project would actually cost. And so I'm going to save this. Yeah, Jaden? Good question. That's a really interesting one. We're going to talk more about that today. So we're going to do some budgets today. I'm going to give you a few sample, real world projects, and then we'll kind of walk through. We'll do one together as a class where we kind of figure out what it would cost, and then I'll tell you what it actually cost. I'm going to give you a separate example, and you guys will try and budget those in your teams, and then we'll compare every team's cost. So that way we'll have gone through a few examples together today. That should help you do your budget for the project. But Jaden, if I forget, we definitely want to come back to this idea of competition, okay, which is basically, without going into it too much right now, typically when we give a client a budget, we get one of two responses, right? What are the two responses they might say to the budget in our proposal? Sorry? Right. So one is it's too expensive, right? That's one possibility. What's the other possibility we get in response to our budget? Never heard that one in 20 years.
But they wouldn't tell you.
Right. So if they thought it was too inexpensive, what would they say to our budget?
They say no.
Yeah, Andy. Right, Andy.
Well, they might
Right.
not think they're-
They might. But typically the responses are either too expensive or great, this looks good. You know, I'll sign, let's get rolling. Those are the two responses. So we want to talk about, we'll come back to this issue. What do we do if we think we've made an accurate, pretty thorough, thoughtful, accurate budget? It's really going to cost this much. What do we do when their response is too expensive? Okay, so we'll talk about that later today. No, well, there's different ways we can handle that, so we'll talk about that because that's a pretty common response. In part, but part of the way we set up our budget can help give us leverage in that conversation. So remind me, Jaden, I'll put it on you if we don't talk. If I forget this later, remind me to talk about it because it's important, right? It's something that happens often. It's too expensive. So what do we do? You know, we want to have a plan for how we respond to that in a productive way without getting into an argument. Okay, so I'll just save this file. Actually, I don't know if it allows me to download it. Let's see. Oh, maybe. Download it as a PNG. Maybe. So just give me a minute and I will save this and upload it to Blackboard. And then, yeah, you don't have to try and look at it on your phone. Upload. So we may come back and refer to this document. Through the class today. Okay. So you guys hit on all the major important points. I'm going to just stress a few of them. Okay. This isn't a very long slide. There's only a few slides. We'll chat for 10 minutes or so and we'll take a break. Okay. Then we'll come back and we'll do some examples together. So 3 things I want you to keep in mind when you're thinking about a budget. Okay. One is your rate. What is a fair rate? Okay. And Margot, I'm going to come back to your point about potentially undercharging. So how much is our time worth? That relates to the second point. Largely, the most important factor in coming up with a cost for a project is how much time are we spending? So it's simply a function of figuring out, A, how much is my time worth, typically on an hourly basis, if I was getting paid by the hour? What is a fair wage? What is a fair rate for me to get paid per hour? Okay, and there's a bunch of factors that go into determining this. We'll talk about them. How much time do I have to spend? And as much as possible, our estimates should be reality-based. It's not about how much money we would like to make. It's about how much money is fair and reasonable in the real world market of web development. What's fair? Let's think about this first for a minute. Now, obviously, your rate will vary somewhat. If you are working as an employee of a company, typically the amount you get paid per hour is less than if you are working for yourself, if you're a freelancer, you have your own business, you're self-employed, or you're a contractor. Why would that be? Why would employees get paid less typically for doing the same work as somebody who is a freelancer? Matt? Okay, because one, the company is going to take a markup on your time. They need to make money. Yep.
Like there's a full scope of running, being able to employ people, not just you're doing.
Right. So they have to make money on the project, but they also have office marketing, all these other things. What other things will a company provide you typically as an employee that you won't be provided if you are a freelancer? Joel? Right. So everything you need to work, the company's going to pay for. They're going to give you a desk. They're going to get you a computer. They're going to get software licenses. So all of that is going to reduce the amount they actually pay you in cash. Good? Right. You may get benefits like health insurance. Company's has to pay for some of those. Right. So that's going to lower your wage. Anything else you would get as an employee of a company, Vivian? Yeah, right. That typically you're hired, even if they don't have work for you for a while, you're probably still, you're going to be paid regularly. And you don't have that when you're a freelancer. You may or may not. So it's riskier. So you can charge more because in effect, it has to mitigate some of that risk for the times when you don't have work to do. Anything else you would get as an employee that you wouldn't get as a contractor? You can think of one or two other important things. Related to, I think you said benefits, Joel. What else would you get when you're employed by a company? Yeah, so you get your company contributing to your pension and paying employment insurance. Yes. Sick days and vacation pay as well. You get paid for those if you're employed by a company. If you're a freelancer, you get none of those things. So not only are you entitled to charge more, you need to make more because you need to account for all of those things your company will pay for if you go and get a job as a developer or a designer in a company. They're going to give you all those things. So how much you should get paid per hour is going to be quite different if you're working for a company and if you're working for yourself. So when we think about what are we charging, we have to take that into account. Are we freelancing or are we employed by somebody else? And also, when we're freelancing, we are responsible to go and find the work. When we're an employee, the company has salespeople, marketing people, account reps. They go find the projects for us. So we don't have to do that work of finding the job. We're just assigned the tasks. Go build this, go design that. We'll handle the clients. So in your budget for your assignment 1, I want you to imagine, so you are a group of independent contractors. You are your own company, but there are no employees. So you're basically a team of freelancers working together. So one of the things you need to think about is what would a fair hourly wage be for us? We're finishing our second year. We've been doing this for almost 2 years full time now, building web applications and designing them. What's a fair hourly wage for us to charge if we're contracting? And many students ask me this. Hey, Rich, I got a project. I have no idea what is a fair rate. I don't want to overcharge, rip off my clients, but I don't want to undercharge either. And as Margot said, there is a risk of charging too low, which is that some clients won't take you seriously. Well, if you're charging so little, you must not be any good at this. So we don't typically want to be the cheapest of the cheap. It doesn't inspire confidence in our clients that we know what we're doing if we're so incredibly cheap. We also don't want to be so incredibly expensive that they say, no way, we're going to pay you that. So I'm not going to tell you what the right amount is here, but this is something that you guys maybe want to think about as a team, right? Because you'll need to factor this into your budget. Figure out the interactive food map's going to take 500 hours, right? how much are you charging per hour? Because that's going to be what your bottom line budget number will be in your assignment. Sorry.
We're charging what we have as our freelance rate.
Yeah. Think about it as your freelance rate. If they actually came to us tomorrow and said, we actually got this huge donation, we got thousands of dollars and we can actually pay you to build this, what would you charge them? That would be a fair rate, okay, based on your skills and experience. We talked a little about this already, about scope creep. It happens in virtually every project. We lay out the functionality and that functionality grows. Okay? So I think, Matt, you were the one who mentioned that's why it's really wise to have a bit of a buffer here if things go wrong and or we're dealing with scope creep. So probably better to overestimate a little bit to account for that. This is a constant battle of scope creep. So one of the ways that we want to manage this is by having a really, really clear set of tasks that are very specific. And that's basically going to be your assignment 2, is taking down the high level functionality from assignment 1 and breaking that down into very specific tasks, and then assigning those tasks to individual people on the team with timelines. Having those tasks helps us manage the scope. If we haven't planned for that task, we can go back to our customer and say, it's extra. Just like the example I gave you last week. We order dinner, we order a meal and a drink at a restaurant. If we then decide we want dessert later, they're not going to give it to us for free, right? They're going to make us pay extra for the dessert. So we have to make our clients pay extra every time they ask for something new. So we never say no. We always say yes. Yes, we'll do that. This is how much more time I need, and this is how much more money it will cost you. Do you want me to do it? Yes or no? Just like, do you want your $5.95 cheesecake? And do we want to wait 10 more minutes for the kitchen to make it and our server to bring it out? If we're willing to wait the extra time and we're willing to pay for it, they're happy to sell it to us. We don't want to pay for it. We don't want to wait for it. That's fine. They're not going to give it to us. Basically, we got 2 choices. This will be our... Okay, we'll talk about this and we'll take a break. So projects can be billed one of 2 ways, right? We can either bill by the hour or we can give a fixed cost. Which one of these do you think is more common and why? Billing hourly or billing a fixed amount? Matt? Okay. Anybody else? What do you think? Vivian? Okay, why would the client prefer fixed cost? Okay, yep, good point. Joel, you're gonna say something? Okay, Brando?
But I don't think a lot of the clients that are going to be approached by understand kind of work goes into the project. They don't have the same knowledge that we do. That's why they're coming to us. So putting it out as like showing them the hours can take maybe, well, why would it take so long and equal out to this cost instead of just showing them the cost. They can maybe appreciate it more than seeing how many hours go into how that cost is factored in.
You raised a really, really important point, and we're going to come back to that point when we actually do a project budget. Okay, that's absolutely right. There's a huge education piece, right? Many things we do that affect the project budget are things most of our clients aren't really going to understand. So it's part of our responsibility to help explain these things to them in a way that they can understand. Okay. And many times they're going to say, what? It's going to cost? I have to pay for that? Or how is that going to possibly cost that much? So I'll give you a concrete example. So remind me to come back to that one. So which one do you think is more common? Billing hourly or billing fixed? Raquel, what do you think? Yeah, fixed is more common. And for the primary reason Vivian said, that your clients then know how much they know before the project, how much money they're going to need to spend on it. This is especially important for when our clients are governments or not-for-profit agencies, because they have to get funding from somewhere else. If I own a business, I can say, oh, I was planning on spending 10,000, but Jaden, you say it's going to be 20. Okay, fine. You know, if I have the money, I can just make it 20. But organizations that are not private businesses, they don't have the same kind of ability. They have to set their budgets for the year, and that's all the money they have. So if they want to do a project and we say, this project is going to cost you $15,000, they need to go to their funding sources and come up with that money. And if the project's more than $15,000, they don't have any more money to spend. Okay? So those budgets are fixed. So most places will want fixed budgets so they know for sure what it will cost. They do sometimes. They do sometimes, and here's a hint. There is tons of money spent in Canada every February and March on IT projects. Tons in government. Here's why. In Canada, the government's fiscal year end is March 31st. And the way that the government works is any department, every year they ask for, they say, this is how much money we want in our department. So in the Ministry of Health, we have an IT budget of $5 billion. What happens is if the next year, end of March comes around and they've only spent $4 billion of that $5 billion, next year, how much money are they going to get for IT projects? $4 billion, right? The Ministry of Finance is going to say, you asked for $5 billion last year, but you only spent $4 billion. So next year, you only get $4 billion. So every February and March, they scramble to have all the money they haven't spent, they try to spend it. Otherwise, next year, their budgets are smaller. I have a good friend who works as an IT project manager at a federal government department in Ottawa. And every year of the beginning of March, he says, can you do like $300,000 worth of work for me in the next month? And I say, there's no possible way I can do it. So if you're freelancing, February and March is the time, go look at the government contracts because they have to spend their budgets. So almost everybody will want fixed. Occasionally for us, coming back to your point, Matt, hourly is better for us because we often don't know exactly how much time it's going to take. We make our best estimates, but it's not an exact science. We don't want to quote for 200 hours and then work 500 hours. So if someone will pay us hourly, that's probably best for us as developers. But very few clients are going to agree to it because it's very difficult for them to have that uncertainty with cost. There's also a big risk. If you think about it, if you had somebody come and do work on your home, say you had a plumbing problem, right? You had a leaky shower, and you call the plumber, right? You're probably gonna want to know before the plumber comes and starts fixing your shower, how much is it gonna cost to fix the shower? You're probably not gonna want them to say, I charge $100 an hour and I have no idea how long this will take, right? Because then you don't know if it's gonna cost $100 or it's gonna cost $1,000. And if you also don't know the plumber, you don't know how honest they're being with their time. So if we can get someone to pay us hourly, it's great, but very few people will agree to it. In 20 years, I've only had a few clients agree to pay me hourly, and it's usually under one of two conditions. Either it's a very small project, something really little, less than a few $1,000s, they'll probably pay hourly. The only other clients I've had to agree to pay hourly are people I've worked with for many years. And eventually I say to them, you trust me, I trust you, you know I'm gonna do a good job and I'm not gonna take advantage of you and overcharge you. So can I stop trying to come up with fixed quotes and just bill you by the hour? I'll give you an estimate, but it's just an estimate. If it takes me less time, you pay less. Takes me more time, you pay more, but I'll always be fair. I will never charge you for time I didn't actually work. But that removes the risk of me. So eventually you may get in that spot if you have a good relationship with somebody and you trust each other. Then you could get to hourly, but most of the time you're going to have to quote a fixed price. We still budget, we figure out the cost based on the hours, but ultimately we're going to have to tell our customer, look, here's the bottom line, here's the total price for this. You want to go ahead, yes or no? Okay, a few other things we can talk about, but it's getting kind of late. We'll actually take a break until 9:40. And we come back, we'll have a chance to go through a couple of scenarios. Okay. We will take a break.